Alright, guys, so I have been researching and reading a lot about, and I've always been into like pagan stuff, mainly like Germanic, not Viking, Germanic stuff since it's so fragmented. But this has taught me years of studying and even reading into the Bible that I've recently started doing about a year ago. And the point of this video is answering what were the original Germanic gods, um, like Twisto and Manus, before Ymir, before Odin, and all that stuff. We're going Proto-Germanic, and I just now looked up some more stuff that links it to the fall of Babel, at least from my interpretation after reading the history of it. So, before I begin, let's get something clear real quick. With the idea that the Germanic tribes and their gods are named after great legends of their people, like actual people of their legends. An example of this would be, I'm going to use the Bible real quick, or even let's go with the Saxons. Their sky god was Sexneat. So, since they thought he was a great king, they called themselves the Saxons. Same with, say, with going with Christian stuff and Hebrew stuff, Israel was an actual person who later has now a country named after him called Israel. And this is, I don't know, this just blows my mind away. And after just like researching stuff, because this is starting to add up, especially once I looked up the Scythian stuff. So with the this is going to be with the fall of Babel, the Tower of Babel, where all the humans pretty much have to disperse across the world now. So in the beginning, we have Noah and his legacy. We have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And from Japheth, we have his legacy with Gomer. From now looking into Gomer, we have Ashkenaz, Rippeth, and Togarmah. From Ashkenaz, even though this is considered to be a forgery, what I have been looking up aligns perfectly with the Germanic people's songs that Tacitus wrote in first source. So in 1498, a monk named Anio de Vertebo published fragments known as Pseudo-Berossus, now considered a forgery, claiming that Babylon records has shown that Noah had more than sons than three, blah blah blah. Specifically, Tuscan or Twisto is given as the fourth son of Noah. Now, um, who had been the first ruler of Scythia and Germany, following the dispersions of the peoples within, being succeeded by his son Manus. Now, this is going to line up with everything right here. And you can see why the German people call themselves the Teutons is because of they had the Teuton forest, or they were named after Twisto. So just like how Israelites call themselves Israelites because they're named after their great human named Israel. So, anyways, the Teutons call themselves the Teutons because they worship Twisto and Twitch, which sounds like modern day Deutsch. And I believe later on I have it. But the origins of the Teutons right here in the additional songs from which their only record of the past, the Germans celebrated an earthborn god called Twisto, who had a son named Manus. So kind of like the lineage of Noah. So um, this is pretty much all lineage. So his son had Manus, who sprang forth the head of their race, and himself begotten three sons. So now we're going to go into his sons: the Inguevones, nearest the sea, the Herminoans, and the interior, and the Istevones, who comprise all the rest. Some authorities with freedom on contract permit remote antiquity assert that Twisto had more numerous descendants, mention more tribal groups such as Marsi, Gambrevi, Suevi, and Vandili. Names which they affirm to be both genuine and ancient. The name Germania, however, is said to have only recently applied to the country the first people crossed the Rhine, and appropriate Gaelic territory, though they are known nowadays as Tungri, were at the time called German, and what was first named one, sorry, what was first the name of this one tribe, not of the entire race, gradually came into general use in wider sense. It was first applied to whole people by conquerors of the Gauls to frighten them. Later, all the Germans adopted it and called themselves by the new name. Now, this next part right here, how this is supposedly a forgery, that he was the first ruler of Scythia in Germany, is another one that I have found, is that Ashkenaz had a brother called Scytha, say the Germans, so the father of the Scythians, for which the Germans of old have been called Scythians too. And this right here is going to link probably a bad misinterpretation of how we got the Viking pantheon of like the 13th century, the Poes Edda. I'll get to that later, but um, several names next to Ixen called Scythia and the country of the Geats. Not the, the Geetes, but the parts of Vistuli called Samartia Europa, and westward it's called Gallia. Celtica, Armenia, Francia, Teutania. For Old German comprehended the greater part of Europe, and those called Gauls were all Old Germans too, by who ancient authors were called Celts, Gauls, and Galatians. But anyways, this is another one of it. So right here we still have Ashkenaz or Ashkenaz about it, talking about how he had a brother named Scythia, and maybe he did have a brother named Scythia, or maybe he was both, like in this thing, both kings of the Germans and Scythians. And why the Scythians matter is because their migration period, even though this is the AI thing, but even if you look in the wiki of it, in the 9th and 7th century before Christ, they migrated from Central Asia to the Punic steppes to modern-day Ukraine and southern Russia at their peak. The territory was roughly stretched forth. So, if we look at the European map from where we say from modern-day Ukraine, so here's Germany, and where's Ukraine at, real quick? And there has also, I'm trying to find it as well, where because they also went into like Poland as well, like all the eastern areas. But right here as well that I've been looking up, we get Ashkenaz again. There are two main sources of information: historical, early from the 7th century BC. Hold on real quick, let me try finding it. I hate this because my head is just running with like, you get that adrenaline whenever you start finding stuff and connecting stuff together. Right here, this is what I'm talking about. The name is derived Scythia, however the hell you pronounce that, meaning archers, which was derived from the Proto-Indo-European root "scud" itself, meaning shooter archer. The same was similar to Uranus, but right here you have other pronunciations for it, like Ashkenaz. See, Ashkenaz from here. So knowing what, all right, let me get deeper real quick with this. What Europe? Right here. So we got 9th and 8th century BC. So this is before the 7th century one. So they went to Poland, Denmark, and the Baltic. And that makes sense for the Baltic because Perkunas is the Baltic's version of Perun. And yeah, during the 7th century. So, with knowing that, right here. So let's go to the world map. And this over here on my right, I hope it's showing it. Let me real quick just pull it up. Yeah, okay, it is. So this over here is the old Germania, like Greater and Lesser Germania. And if we compare it to the map of today, so here's that peak right here. So here's like Denmark. Oh, I can't scroll up. But anyways, this is perfect. So this is Denmark right here. We follow it to this first peak. So we follow it to this first peak right here. We move over to the right, move over to the right, and up to that corner, and up to that corner. This is considered Germania 2. So these guys, I wonder, and to test this, this is I want to say like the first century AD. So the year like say 50 or the year 90. I don't remember. But anyways, um, right here, knowing this and how even this lines up with it, Scythia, knowing that the Scythians have migrated to this, I wonder if the group that they encountered were like the Proto-Slavs, basically, with it. So, since these guys are talking about how all of a sudden these guys, they hate a brother named Scythia, and even, you don't really see it in this one's at all, because this probably was a Swabi tribe, so someone down here that was talking about their origin as well. And I just think that's very neat how it like links together. So, also Tiwaz. So before you had Odin as the main sky god, Tyr was the sky god of the Germans and early Viking people as well. This the early Germans worshipped Tiwaz as their sky god. At least the one group that they had Wodenaz, Sturnas, and Tiwaz. Tiwaz was the original sky god. And if we read what Tiwaz or Tyr even means, because Tiwaz is the Pro-Germanic and even the rune version of it, it means God. And in the Bible, Tyr and God have a similarity where they're the both God of justice and war, and it because God does declare war on other tribes in it and does uphold justice. So if we had to say interpret the Bible with Germanic wordings, since Vikings also did ancestor worship with elves, you could become an elf in death, pretty much like how a human could become a saint, is how in the Viking death cults you could become an elf, actually. Not a Lossafaro, Darkafaro, Svinsfaro, but and just an elf because I remember reading a story that Olaf was the first person to become an elf. But and that's do your own research for that stuff. But this is pretty neat. So with the Germanics way of it is were they actually close unknowingly? Like, are we blind that they were actually close with God Tiwaz and why it was so easy for them to convert to Christianity, basically during like the whole Christian stuff? But anyways, from this, let's replace the word God with Tyr. So we have Tyr, and then we have all the humans that Tyr has made. So now we get to Tuisto, or Ashkenaz, I mean, who is now Twisto. So we have Tyr as actual god, then as a human, then there's humans, because different tribes are named after different humans, and then different humans become into an saint state or to a god state or even an elf state within the Viking stuff. But anyways, so we have Tiwaz Tyr as god, and then we have a human Twisto, the first lineage of the Germans, who made like the Teutons, who then had Manus, who then Manus gave birth to the first three tribes, and then those tribes also had other tribes, and it got smaller and smaller. And same with the Scythians. There was a brother of Tuisto named Scytha, who found the Scythians, and then from there found the Slavic areas. And yeah, even in the one book, the Getia, even in Total War, too, Getia, the nomadic people, um, are also confused as Goths as well, because the original sky god for the Norwegians, or the war god, was Gout, like the disease Gout. So I wonder if there's a person named Gout that became war god essentially. But even whenever we were reading about um, Scythians, how it said that they were called the bow people as well. See, shooter, archer means self literally shooter, archer. The Scythian derives from to pro interpunius skewed uh, itself meaning shooter, archers. And then if we get to like the Zalamox cult, because in the Count Jordan Croesus or Herodotus, Grecian demigod Zalamox becomes king of the Goths. And the way that his saying is that describes two rituals consecrated to Zalamox, the sacrifice of a messenger performed every 5 years, and the shooting of arrows during thunderstorms. The Getia are the bravest of the Thracians and the most just. They believe they are immortal, forever living in the following. I'll let you guys just read it. But right here, you see we have a human named Zalamox who then becomes, in, say, Christian terms, a saint, or possibly even in the Nordic death cult, he becomes an elf. Um, or he even just becomes a god as well. And then, so it lines up perfect with the Scythians, how they're called shooter archers, and where they settled, we even looked that up, was like in Poland as well. Yeah, right here, Poland, Denmark, parts of Denmark, which is pretty cool, and the Baltic states. So I'll give you a second to pause this and read it if you want. And then the other strange thing is what Tacitus writes about. Well, yeah, here's the Germanic Zalmoxis thing. It says that the oldest and most famous of the Suebi, it said, are the Simones. So even from the Suebi, you had another tribe that came from them, the Simones, and they were taken confirmed by religious reigns disputed from all tribes of the same stock together in grave hollows. Ancestors and more sacrifice a human victim named Allmark's Grizzly, opening up their savage ritual. Another shows this reverence grow, no one else may enter bound. But yeah, I'll give you guys another sec to read this one. This probably looks like shit. Should do slideshow mode. But anyways, another thing is how the Germanic people did marriages. So right here it says their marriage code, however, is strict and no feature of their morality deserves higher praise. And no feature of their morality deserves higher praise. They are almost unique among barbarians in being content with one wife, apiece. All of them, that is, except a very few who take more than one wife, not to satisfy their desires, but because their exalted rank brings them many pressing offers of matrimonial alliances, which you see that too in the Bible as well, where people get married to other people to form alliances as well. The dowry is brought by the husband to wife, blah blah blah. But just reading it as well as how you only have one wife, and they actually have and considering both gifts, and they actually like exchange gifts or like say rings, or I know the Vikings, if you liked a woman you're about ready to marry her, you give her two kittens. That's at least one thing I read about the Vikings, that they offered two kittens to their wives. But anyways, in consideration of such gifts, a man gets his wife, and she in her turn brings a present of arms to her husband. This interchange of gifts typifies for them the most sacred bond of union, sanctified by mystic rites under the favor of the presiding deities of wedlock. The woman must not think that she is excluded from aspirations to manly virtues or exempt from hazards of warfare. That is why she is reminded in the very ceremonies which bless her marriage at its outset, that she enters her husband's home to be the partner of his toils and perils, that both in peace and in war she is to share his sufferings and adventures. That is the meaning of the team of oxen, the horse ready for its rider, and the gift of arms. On these terms she must live her life and bear her children. She is receiving something that she must hand over intact and underappreciated to her children. Underappreciated? Yeah, to her children. Something for her sons' wives to receive in their turn and pass on to her grandchildren. But yeah, it pretty much lines up with Christianity, or even with Hebrew scriptures. This does the how the Germanic people did marriages, where you two are now one with each other. You must like share the same rights and just all that kind of stuff. And the fact that it even says that the Germans, you could even read that even like modern day Slavic women, you hear how they're like hard to date since they're, I don't know, it's just they're very like relationship organized with it. And just the fact that out of all the barbarians, they are the most unique. They are almost unique among barbarians and being content with one wife, which is blows the Romans away, because this is the Tacitus writing of Germania. This is all firsthand. I'm not going to say pagan sources, because the Romans were not pagans. Because in order to be a pagan, you have to worship stuff outside of buildings, like in forgeries and pages. And we can even look up the term pagan as well. Hold on real quick. Fallen nature. All right, it doesn't have to be uh that at all, but here it is. Yeah, the word pagan comes from the Latin word paganus, which originally meant country dweller or villager. So if you're like, say, worshiping a god outside of a temple, outside of walls, and you're giving it to like the tree of Donor and all that Charlemagne cut down with the Saxons and all that, that is paganism, because your god is not confined inside a a temple. It doesn't actually have actual ruins. That's why they the Romans and Greeks were different than pagans of the Germanic peoples, because whenever the Greeks and Romans went to like the Gauls and the Germanic lands, they couldn't see their gods at all, because they didn't have temples. They're worshiping this tree, and you can read that in Tacitus, where it blows their mind about it. It's like, how do they know where to go in the Tuantin art, which still, how do they know where to go in the forest without roads and all this? And that's why you got Tacitus writing about that the Germans only worship what they could see. So if they see the sun come up, the sun is their god. They see the water is their god. Fire is their god. They only could see uh, what is visible to them, and that just complexes the Romans, who have statues of their gods, that have temples of their gods. Slavs, later on, we do know that Slavs had, and even Vikings as well, later on, started having temples as well. But you got like the uh, pillars of Perun, but still, that's not confined in a temple. That's out in the open, where you'll have like a mount, like a trench built in a circle. Then you have like Perun's altar in the center of that. Then you have like bonfires all in the circle of the trench. But oh no! Let's see real quick. I accidentally closed the tab. Okay, good. But that just kind of blows my mind, just reading, and especially uh with the Scythians, of where they were: Ukraine, southern Russia, Poland, Denmark, and the Baltic states. And this is where I believe that modern day Viking culture of Valhalla, Odin, all that kind of stuff is kind of skewed between a mix between Germanic and Slavic deities, and Slavic and Germanic stories merging together because of just because of how close they were to each other. I had more of the reasoning for it. But anyways, for the Slavs, you had Perun, Perun, for their thunder lightning god, who was their head chief of their people. And then you got the Baltics people, who had Prokunas instead, and it was the exact same thing, where Prokunas was their sky god. And even some Germanic tribes worship Thunras over Odin and over Tiwaz and over Twisto or Manus. But just from reading these sources, I know this probably botched how I'm talking, but if you actually just like look at the world, and it makes sense for the migration period than it does with the story of Ymir, Odin, and his three brothers creating the world with Ymir's brains. But that idea, I want to say with Ymir, is probably the Yamnaya tribe that was at war with, say, one of the Slavic or Germanic tribes at the time. So we could say that Ymir was an actual human from the Yamnaya tribe, and Odin was an actual human that killed with his three brothers that killed off that defended the Germanic or Slavic lands from the invasion of the Yamnaya people from the Ymir. And then that's how the new modern Viking story occurred, was because Odin, or whatever his name was back then, because he also had Godin, which for the Lombards was Godin, and later became the word God. Whenever they turned to Catholicism, they got rid of the other D and dropped the last two letters and made God from that. But you even have here Tyr, which was the original sky god of the Germanic people, and then uh, became Tiwa, or not became Tiwas, but still, just the word just means God in general. But that is just something more to think about, especially if we go with the Tower of Babel as well. Like, why do Africans look like that? Why do Europeans look like this? Why do Asians look like that? Well, if we go with the Tower of Babel theory about what if that is true, the Tower of Babel, and the whole migration stuff started happening, why we have different cultures, whatnot, is all these people were just actual humans that were just great, that they had a tribe named after them because of how great or historic they were to them, like Ragnar Lothbrok, right? We're going to be the sons of Ragnar, we're going to be the tribe of Ragnar. Or you could use that with any name like Smith. Let's go with that. Like, say that you know a friend whose last name is Smith. Well, he was such a great person. We're going to name this road, town, or village after him, and we're going to call ourselves the Smithonites. And you see that even with the Bible with the Cainites and the Sethites as well, where they name themselves after it. And the term Germanic people was doffed onto them by the Romans, so that's whenever they took it. And even here, uh, yeah, where it's a new wormed dawned on themselves as well. Whenever you read this right here is the Germanic song. This is what I found as well. Just looking this stuff up. So it's just cool. So if you, and this is probably gonna piss some pagans off, which I don't care because it adds up. Because you have Tiwaz was the original sky god, so you had God. Then you had Tuisto, an actual human. Then Tuisto had a son named Manus. Then Manus or Tuisto had no. Then Manus had Inguavones, Inguastones, and then Harmones. Those first three tribes are named. And then other tribes are saying, well, Tuisto although had another son, like Swaby was another son of him as well. Yeah, right here you see the vanilla names which affirm both be genuine and ancient. The name Germania, however, is said to be only recent country. The first to be able to cross the Rhine and propagate, though they are known nowadays as Tungri, or at time called German. But yeah, right here it says some assert that Tuisto had more numerous descents and mention more tribal groups such as the Marsi, Gambrivi, Swabi, and Vandili. And Vandili, I believe, is one of the names of Odin's brothers, or at least it's Vindili, I believe. Odin's brothers. Yeah, Vili and Ve. So I wonder if let's go back. I wonder if Vili is probably from Vandili tribe, and then you have the one Ve is probably the shortening of Gambrivi. Yeah, so Ve, V with apostrophe, and then you have Vili. So I wonder if, since these are the first three tribes, so I wonder if, or wait, where is it? Yeah, Swabi. Since we know that the Swabians had Wodenus, so I wonder if Swabi was Wotan, Odin, whatever, Godin. I wonder if Swaby was the original Odin, and then his brother was Gambrivi and Vindili, which became Vili and no V and what was it? Vili, yeah, V and Ve and Vili. And then you also have Marcy as well. And it even said in Nordic scriptures that Odin found the runes, and we know the word Ingve, the two X's on top of each other, was the Proto-Germanic version of Frey. Ingve, Ingve, rune. Yeah, in Elder Futhark, the NG sound of Ingwaz, Ingwe, and it is the uh, Proto-Germanic version. Ingwaz, yeah, Invaz or Ingwaz was a reconstruction Proto-Germanic name for the ancient fertility god. So, uh, yeah, the true name origins Freyr, Old Norse Lord for Lord, is actually an honorific title than a proper name. The god's original name was Ingves. So I believe that Elder Futhark uh, are the original gods, basically, like the Fehud rune, the Nerthus rune. Nerthus, that's also a Germanic god, a Proto-Germanic god. So the In rune, right here, uh, Nadus, Nadus, and then we look up, uh, we also know that Nerthus was a Germanic god, and then we have this thing that sounds like Nerthus, Nadus, as well. So let's look her up real quick. As well as an ancient Germanic god of fertility of the earth, first documented in the 100 Christ's existence. So in the 1 AD, basically 100 CE. So this might be the uh, second century or so, probably the first century AD. And that's why you also have the cult of Isis being mentioned in Tacitus' works as well. And that makes sense for where the say Scythians started, was like more of like a Eurasian east Eurasian to Near East steppes that migrated over. So it makes sense if that was them. And then the Germanics also worshipped Isis as well. And then there's some who believe that this is the wife of, or the wife of someone within the Viking Prose Edda or whatever, but it's not really mentioned at all. So I don't know. I just take the whole Viking Prose Edda with a grain of salt, since that was written by a 13th century Christian scholar from Iceland. While what I'm telling you is first century heathen, pagan Romans writing about heathen, pagan Germans. So it's like non-God followers, non-God followers, non-Christians, non-Hebrews talking about other non-Hebrews at the time, not having it corrupted or tainted by writing about God, essentially, like, or not tainted, but just not having a Christian propaganda thrown into the whole thing. So I just think that's kind of cool. Really cool, just learning and connecting it, especially since I just looked up today like the whole Scythian stuff, and I literally just found this today, and I'm like, that's it, I gotta make this video. I've been sitting on making this video for 2 years now with it. Scythian Germanic just cautious steps in 9th and 8th century, but yeah, it's just neat just reading about this, because if that's true, then that does mean that the Slavs and Germanic people are of the same. Well, everyone's of the same blood technically, if you believe in the Tower of Babel, which is, at least to me, this does prove the Tower of Babel's existence in a way, since the Germanic gods, or since the Germans talk about Tiwaz, Tyr, which just translates to modern day God. Since they talk about Tyr, and then they start to worship Tuisto, and then Tuisto had Manas, and then from Tuisto's brother named Sitha, or maybe Tuisto is also the Scythian himself, is also part Scythian or whatever. But still, just knowing that and reading Tacitus, reading about the Scythians, reading about the Germanic people, reading about the tribes of the Germanic people, and then the possible orientation of it, it just adds up and is pretty cool. So yeah, and even modern day Christians could take Christianity to, with the definition, to a pagan viewpoint, because in the Bible it also talks about how God doesn't want like a, say, like an idol of himself, pretty much just worship nature and just carry me in your heart, which is what like the pagans, so like the Germans and Slavs and Celts and Gauls did. Is they didn't really have shrines. Instead they had pageries, forestry, that they worshipped their gods, or let's not say gods. We could say gods or say saints, equivalent to a saints or equivalent to someone arriving to a demigod statehood. That because even modern day Christians and the Crusaders too, they pray to saints. So say if you can't fight, say if you lost something, right? You'll pray to Saint Anthony to help you find something. We know we have sources that Crusaders during the Crusades, they would actually pray to David, to Saint David, and they'll also pray to Saint Simon, or Samson, I mean, and also to Saint Michael as well, like as an archangel of war. And we also know that the Slavs, as the Poles were becoming more Christian, as the Polish were becoming more Christians, some of the tribes converted easily to Christianity because instead of worshiping Perun, you're now going to worship Saint Michael. You're going to replace the word Perun with Saint Michael, and of course they took down their totems of that stuff. But that's why so many of the pagan Germanic and Slavic tribes converted so easy, like Clovis the First and all that, because he had a dream that if he painted a cross on a shield, he'll win against the Romans, and they did win against the Romans after doing that. So that right there is like kind of paganism, where you're having like visions and like just still that whole ancestor worship, where you have the ancestor dreams as well, which is what Vikings would do as well. They'll sleep on top of like burial mounds, the death cults. If you look at the death cults of the Vikings, like the elf, how people could become elves and whatnot. So then, in order to like see your ancestor, you'll sleep on top of, say, their grave or burial mound, and they could visit you in a dream. They could visit you in like, this goes with the DMT that your brain naturally produces, but all this stuff of spirituality, I don't care if you is yeah, I don't care if you don't believe in Jesus, if you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the Christian stuff and all that. This all is the exact same with it. Like those who are actually spiritually awakened, that could feel their spine tingle whenever something. I'm talking about like a spine tingle, like something sends something cold down your spine and then comes back up and it hits your heart and then it hits your brain, where it's like it's that strong. I'm talking to these people that are actually spiritually connected, that has, say, a third eye open, their DMT eye open, or whatever. Because what if DMT is the real world and all that? Because you hear stories of people tripping on DMT, seeing little elves in the forest and undescribable things that they see. So it's like a two-way, or it's like we're on the same plane of existence, just we can't, those on the spiritual side could see us, but we can't see them because our brain is subduing all the DMT in it, that we can't actually see the spiritual realm for this stuff. And yeah, it's just crazy looking this stuff up and actually seeing in history, thank God that people wrote stuff down, how they're all linked together, at least especially with the whole Slavs and Germanic people, because right here on the right hand side we can see that that Germania also consisted of like Poland and Ukraine and all that kind of, well, not Ukraine, but still just in general the Polish and Baltic regions. Let's go back to that. So yeah, so right here, so Vitavi, Vitava, It's just neat just looking at this and seeing that it's actually all connected, written from Roman sources. Thank God the Romans wrote shit down. So yeah, so Denmark is right up here. Here, let's zoom in so we could get this accurate. So there's that corner right there, right here, crossing that green line, crossing to that green line, moving east from here, we're now entering Poland. So right here, we're now entering Poland. We go, let's go back west. So let's hop over here and go a bit south, which I believe that looks smaller today. Or this right here. So right here. So wait, hold on. Germania. Stick up here. Go down. So yeah, even parts of like the Czechoslovakia region, Czech area is considered Germanic as well. So I don't know. I just want to get your guys' thought on this because this at least says more than the whole. This at least makes more sense to me than the whole Viking creation story, where the Vikings, where there's Odin, Vili, and Ve, and then they kill Ymir, and then from Ymir's brains they make the world. It's like, all right, well, that doesn't really explain. At least I haven't looked into it. How we have Asians looking like Asians. Then we're just talking about. While this actually has a story of there was Tiwas, humans, a human named Twisto had Manas, the Manas had the other tribes, and from there came out. Just like how the Saxons, like, let's look up Saxonite real quick. Saxnot was the national god of the Saxons. He is sometimes identified with either Tiwas, Fruyas, or Freyr. So still, the creation of Saxons, they had Saxnot as their, or Note, Sex, and then right here it says Neat. So Sex, Neat, Sex, Neat. So yeah, it's like, what if that is true? It's like, alright, here's a human who is very great. Say he was the nicest man or the best warrior that kept his people safe. We're going to now name ourselves after him. We're going to take pride in his name and all that, and we're going to try living to his status, basically. So, yeah, it's just cool because at the end of the day, you can't argue that the word Tiwas, theater, means God at the end of it. So, like in Germanic or Nordic tongues, you would say theater. Germanic, you'll say Tiwas. But at the end of the day, that's what it translates to, God. No other one. Thor doesn't translate to God. Neither does Odin. Let's see what Thor translates to. Thor just translates to thunder, and that's where we go again with the Germanic people what Tessus wrote. They only worshipped what they could see. So the Germanic people that hear thunder, they call it Thornas. That comes and they call it Thor. The Slavs, they hear thunder, they call it Peruns coming, and then you got the Baltics, they call it Perkanus, basically. So Thor translates to thunder. Odin translates to frenzy, a lord of frenzy, leader of, master of SC. Translate, yeah. So Wodenaz, linguistically, it translates to master of ecstasy, lord of frenzy, leader of possessed slash inspired. So right now, you could say I have a Wodenaz going on. I have a frenzy going on, possessed by, leader of possessed slash inspired, because something in me is like, now is the right time to make this, since I actually have found, because I've been sitting on wanting to do this for 2 years, and it was only this week that I started reading about like the Slavs, because something in my heart and spine and head told me to get out my Perun's axe bracelet again. And yeah, you guys know I wear the St. Peter's cross, but something in my spine shot up to my heart, into my mind, saying I need to grab the Perun axe again. So yeah, with pagan stuff, and I'm talking about like the actual pagan where you worship stuff out in nature, and even in the, I know some people are gonna hate this me quoting Bibles. Some people just hate the whole Bible, just angers them for whatever reason. Well, I get some reasons why it angers them, but and that has to do with spirituality. And me, I'm huge I am into this stuff, wizardry, witchcraft, earthly stuff, spiritual, because it is legit. It is true. Jesus, you read it. Jesus did battle demons. He did get rid of Legion out of the one woman, and then there's those two demons that were cast into the sow to pigs and whatnot. But you just read this stuff and start connecting dots, and you start figuring out. It just all starts to make sense, way more sense. Less question, like I have less questions about the Germanic gods like Nerthus, Isis, Woldenas, Tiwas, Thunaras, and Manas Twisto now from looking from it through this lens. And after I had that spiritual awakening, it was 2 days ago. It was on the day I got off in that morning. Something in my heart, like it started my spine. I'm telling you, it was like a cold chill spine thing. It started my spine. And something told me to go ahead and remove the St. Peter's cross necklace, find the Pederun axe bracelet instead. And once I did that, I started researching more. And this was the final circle to wrap up the whole thing. And I know I should put this at the beginning, but here's the slideshow. So right here, I'll give you 5 seconds each to pause it and read it. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, ja, 5. 1, 3, 5, no, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could definitely look up, how do I go back? Oh no! Sorry. So right here, you can look up Zalamox, and this is what I'm talking about, like ancestor worship, having ancestors become demigods, become saints, become elves, basically. But Zalamox becomes king of the Goths, and sometimes the Goths get confused with the Getia, Scythians, and Dacians as well in Roman writings. First-hand sources of experience them without Christian input into this stuff. Even though what I'm talking about does have Hebrew Christian stuff in it right now, what I'm saying adds up to the whole dispersion of people of Babel. And then here's the Zalamox ritual. You can look this stuff all up on your own, start connecting your own dots and whatnot. And just the final thoughts page. I hope this makes sense to some people and that you guys actually stick with this video and actually watched it, because this is something that's just been on my mind. Especially if you just look up the Germanic, like look up Tacitus, read about Germania, Tacitus Germania, however you want to pronounce it, alright, you nerds. Look that up, read their first-hand sources about it. Now some people are like, oh well, this is Roman propaganda about how bad Rome is compared to like how we lesser than. Like, shut up, read it, connect the dots, read other sources, connect the dots, like what I'm doing right here. It's just fucking crazy. Yeah, right here, Ashkenaz, fucking crazy. Ashkenaz. Which thought scribal error was corrupted to Ashkenaz. It's right fucking there, man. It's, and then you'd read the actual stories of Ashkenaz or Twisto, who had a brother named Sitha, or maybe Twisto and Sitha are the same, since it's all oral. It got lost in translation when the Romans were writing this stuff down. And you look at the map too of what the Romans considered Germania at the time, and you have Slavic regions in it. So Just at the end of the day, I believe that the Prose Edda is a hybrid mix between Slavic and Germanic cultures. Uh, and yeah, it's just neat. So I hope you guys, at least the people who are more spiritual, know what I'm saying. Like, are getting what I'm saying and having that Woden frenzy in their heart, that Odin friend, that frenzy of wanting to find more about it. Because yeah, at the end of the day, Tiwaz translates to God, and you read about the creation myth of the Germans. The I shouldn't say myth, well, mythos, I should say. I don't. So to me, the word myth, I'm not saying is like fake and all that, since all the spiritual shit is and could be real. So yeah, no other Norse gods unless someone point me else that something else means God, because we know that Freyr means Lord, so that was a title, but Tiwaz, Tyr, means God. And what's the similarities between God in the Bible and Tyr? They're both gods of justice, and both are gods of war. As you see with Clovis the First, whenever he was being invaded by the Romans, he had a dream that if he painted a cross on their shield, they'll win. You look at Samuel 15, where God tells Samuel to tell Saul to make war with the Amalekites and utterly destroy all of them. You see it with Samson and the Philistines as well. So God is the God of justice and God of war too. He is all loving and all that kind of stuff too. But like pagan gods, they are of multiple things. Just like how God is, or Thor is the god of thunder and war. Odin's the god of is the god of frenzy and war. Tyr is the god of justice and war. It all just connects back to it. Because at the end of the day, Tiwaz translates to God. In English ton. In the English ton, Tiwaz translates to God. And the Germanic marriages are so damn close to, this is the biggest one right here, is so damn close to modern day marriages, where it's only having one wife. You exchange gifts, exchange vows. Modern day stuff, we exchange rings. Even on the show Vikings, they show that too, where Floki and what was Helga? I don't remember her name. It's been years since I saw Vikings, man. But anyways, you see them exchanging stuff. They have like the rings on the sword, and they exchange rings. This stumped the fucking Romans, that they would only have one wife apiece unless it was for uh like binding two different tribes together, matrimonial alliances. And you see that stuff as well in the Bible, where a pharaoh would marry this person to have an alliance with another group, basically. And this, it's just mind blowing. Just all that stuff. So, yeah, so if we look through this, say, from a Christian's lens, right? Let's say that Twisto is a saint, like Saint Twisto, and then you have Saint Manus, then you have Saint Inguevonis, Saint Harmonis, Saint Estevonis, and then you have like just all them as different saints, or demigod this, demigod that, demigod Saint Odin, Saint Thor, um, because I think it's Elijah or Eliza, I don't know. It's one of the Hebrew ones that is also a saint who rides a chariot and throws fireballs, which is what one of the Slavs started worshiping when they became Christians. Instead of Perun, they worshiped that saint instead. So it all connects, and I hope someone gets what I'm saying. And if you did watch this all the way through, thank you so much. And I love to hear your guys' thoughts, because this is something that's just been eating at my heart for so long. And since today I found this missing piece of the Slavs puzzle, found the missing puzzle piece of the Slavs and the Scythians, connecting them finally together. So, thank you.